everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Alexandra McLeod, Head of Branded Programming at Women as One. Thank you for joining our Finding Grit and Grace to Lead during COVID-19 webinar hosted by Dr. Sasha Shillcutt. Our mission at Women as One is to support women in medicine. And in the face of the COVID-19 crisis, we feel called to that mission now more than ever. We recognize that women make up much of the frontline healthcare workforce and that all healthcare providers are being impacted by this stressful crisis. We hope this webinar provides you all with a resource to support your well-being, and we're so thankful for all that you're doing. I'll formally introduce Dr. Shillcutt in just a moment. I just first wanted to make a few housekeeping notes. The presentation will run for approximately 30 minutes and will be followed by a Q&A session. And as you've probably all seen, participants are not able to speak, but you can use the Q&A button on your screen to type a question that Dr. Shillcutt can view and respond to during the Q&A. Now, I'm honored to introduce Dr. Shillcutt. She is a tenured professor and the Vice Chair of Strategy and Innovation in the Department of Anesthesiology at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. She is the CEO and founder of Brave Enough, a well-published researcher in cardiac anesthesiology and gender equity, a cardiac anesthesiologist, an author, and an international speaker. Her first book, Between Grit and Grace, How to Be Feminine and Formidable, was released in February 2020. Thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Shillcutt. Over to you.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I'm super excited that I get to chat with all of you. And hopefully, I'm going to do this the correct way. Now, can you guys see my screen or no? Not yet.
We don't see it quite yet.
Okay.
So if you hit share screen, there we go.
Okay.
Yep.
Right now? Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to go through what I have prepared for you all, and that is basically how we can lead during this challenging time. And I think many times we think of leadership as something that is, correlates with a title and a salary, but the truth is that we are all leading ourselves right now. We're leading our own health and well-being. Many of us are leading our families, we're leading in our communities. So I think that I want you to think about leadership a little differently as we go through this lecture. And I'm hoping that I can leave all of you encouraged, because I think that right now we have so much anxiety and so much unknown. And I just hope that I can encourage all of you. I really want this to be a discussion. So I'm going to keep my lecture short, like 25 minutes or less. And then we can talk and discuss. And I'm hoping that I can share with you a little bit of what motivated me to write the book Between Grit and Grace and how that applies to us leading during this pandemic. So for disclosure reasons, I am the founder of Brave Enough, as you know. I think I want to compare what is often, I think, felt by many of us in medicine as women, but not always described or defined. And that's what's called leadership backlash and social backlash. I'm going to talk about the narrow margin of what it means to be a woman in medicine and lead as a woman in medicine, which is so applicable right now, and what it means to lead authentically. So as you know, we are here. We are in the front lines. We're in the trenches. You look around and you might not really see gender bias or discrepancies in leadership because maybe you're on the front lines, and most of us in healthcare are on the front lines as women. I remember in my first 5 years when I was an anesthesiologist, I didn't really recognize gender bias or discrimination, or I never felt held back, but that's because I was in the trenches and there were a lot of women there. And it really honestly wasn't until I started to excel and started to lead or accept leadership roles that I ever felt or really noticed that perhaps there was gender bias. And so while we make up about 83% women, or 87%, it depends on the statistic, in healthcare as women, we only represent anywhere from 3% of the boardroom, like the C-suite, to 7% down to about 13 to 14% middle management. So as you can see here, the more we go through our career, the less and less and less we find ourselves surrounded by other women. And it changes oftentimes the way that we interact with other women. And we often have to become something that doesn't feel authentic to who we are in order to be in those spaces. And that oftentimes, I think, in my opinion, and what I've talked to thousands of women that I speak to all over the world, it affects your decision to want to lead right now. So let's take this into today's example. We have this pandemic. Here we have a lot of quick decision needs. Like, we're making fast decisions about anything from PPE to how we're going to restructure our care teams to restructuring our FTE models. And you may have an idea and you may know the answer to that idea, but you don't want to speak up, or you don't want to give that idea because you know the backlash that you're going to feel, or you feel like it's going to put you in a category where you're not going to be able to be your authentic self. And I think women, this happens often, and it's because exactly this graph that you're looking at here, this graph shows, as we excel, we become more and more isolated. So why is this? Okay, why? It's really not okay. I mean, if you think about it, if you go back to this slide, we all look at this slide and go, wow, at the end of our career, there's 15% of us leading an actual like area of the workforce that is 87% women. It's pretty crazy, but we accept it. We accept it every day as kind of the status quo. So I love this graph. I always use this because I think it's hilarious that this is from the World Global Health. So if you look at healthcare in the entire world, women get 2 legs. We don't even get like a full leg. We get like socks. So we are very, very few of us are in the top positions, as you can see here. So we're part of the workforce, but we're really not. And what this means is we're not where decisions are being made. And there's a reason. There's several reasons, and there's not just one reason. But oftentimes, what we can control is stepping forward to be in those areas. We don't want to do it. And that's what I want to talk about today. We actually don't want to lead. Why is that? So I think if we have to ask ourselves this, I know there's been times where in my life, just in the last couple months, I've been approached to apply for different leadership positions outside of my institution. And I didn't think either opportunity was appropriate for me during that period of my life, but most of it was not because I didn't think I could do it, and not because I didn't think I would be good at it. In fact, I think I would have been good at either job, but it was because I wasn't willing to sacrifice certain elements of my life to make that jump. And I think that's probably the majority of why we don't step forward and either give our idea or we don't take a step forward to put our hat in the ring and lead during this crisis right now. It's not because we're not capable or we don't think we can. There's a lot of focus on imposter syndrome, but I actually think it's because the sacrifice of what it would cost us personally is so great, and that we're not willing to do it. And isn't that sad? It's sad that, I know that if I would have taken either one of these jobs, the way I am as a person would have had to have changed. My priorities would have had to have changed. And I don't think that is the same case for most men. They don't have to change who they are to accept roles. They don't have to change their priorities. And they're not as nearly as isolated as we are when we step into leadership roles. Even minor leadership roles within our own departments and our own communities can be extremely isolating for women. So this is from the AAMC, and if you look at this, you can see, like, we start out here, this is bachelor's, so this is from an educational standpoint. The more educated you are as you go down, the more and more and fewer and fewer and fewer women are on board. So what is really interesting to me as a woman in medicine is, does leadership mean that you're happy? Because I don't think that we as women ever get asked that question, whether or not we're happy in our jobs. And oftentimes we're not happy, but what drives us to make decisions is based on our happiness. So this is really, really interesting. They did a workforce study for the whole general US population. So this is not specific to medicine. This is for the whole US population. They looked at like thousands and thousands of people over, I think like 40,000 people over, and they tracked them over 3 decades. So a long study. And as over 30 years, as you imagine, women gained more opportunities, women entered more fields, they took on more responsibilities, and they had more salary bumps. But guess what also went along with that? They were less happy than they were 30 years ago, women are today in the workforce, higher rates of depression, and less workplace joy. So to me, that's a really important. I mean, we can have all the pay that we want or the promotion we want, but if we have to change ourselves and if we have to be isolated, who wants to do that? I mean, I know I don't. So you might be thinking, well, this is really depressing. What, I thought you were going to encourage us today, Sasha. I promise I am. That's coming. I just want you to think about leadership and how you lead in a little different way. And why I want you to kind of do a self-evaluation of maybe why you don't want to lead or why you feel like you can't lead right now, because you can. You have amazing ideas. You are all so talented. You have amazing expertise, and we need you. So have you ever been, I wish I could see all of you, because if we were doing this in a live event, I would ask you to raise your hand if you've ever been called any of these. And what's funny is, I bet you've been called some of these, and they're very polar opposite. For example, I often get told that I'm very aggressive and I'm very assertive. I've been called that my whole career. But sometimes I'll go into a meeting and I won't say anything. I'll just be in listening mode. And after the meeting, someone will always come up to me and say, "Why were you so quiet?" And I just laugh, because I'm like, everyone has expectations of us as women that they do not have on for men. It's very, very true. And this is not my opinion. This has been studied a million times in the psychology and in the employment literature, that we have expectations of women, and it's a narrow, narrow margin. So what happens is, I'm a junior faculty and I'm told I'm too aggressive in the OR. So I move towards the middle. I become less aggressive. And then I go over here and I go to a meeting and I'm told I'm a little too quiet. So then I move back towards the middle. And the margin of what we have to experience over a 30-year career gets more narrow and more narrow and more narrow. And that's called micro level feedback. And it's so powerful. Okay, so micro level feedback can be, you email someone in your department 2 weeks ago about PPE. Or you have an idea and you never get a response. The leader doesn't respond to you. And then 3 days later, that leader sends out an email saying, "We're going to do this thanks to Dr. So-and-so for the idea." And it was your idea, actually, but you never even heard back. Now, for whatever reason that transpired, it actually gives you feedback. So the next time that you have an idea, even if it's a great idea, even if it's going to help a patient or help one of your partners or help your department become more efficient or more successful, you're not going to give that idea up very easily. You're going to actually probably think of, what did I say wrong in the email? Should I have sent that? Was I too aggressive? So micro level feedback is it's so powerful that we don't even realize it's shaping us and how we lead in our workspaces. This is macro level feedback. So many of you know, and if you don't know my story, you'll read it in the book. I burned out about 5 years ago, which is why I started Brave Enough, why I started speaking on this, why I really got interested in gender equity. And before that, I had been really focused on cardiac anesthesia research, and I had grants, and I was very focused on that. But I burned out, and it led me to about a year of building myself up and really just looking at my mess of a life, which it was a hot mess. And I read about 30 books. because this is what we do as women, right? Something's wrong with us. We aren't succeeding. We got to fix ourselves. So I went out to the store and went to Kindle and went to Barnes & Noble. I bought like all these books. I downloaded all these books and I read everything. And by the time I finished reading 30 books, I felt like I had personality whiplash. One book would tell me to lean in. The next book would say, don't lean in too far. You're going to get your head cut off. One book would say, speak up. This is how you speak at meetings. The other book would say, don't speak until the end of the meeting. I mean, it was like, it's crazy. The feedback that we get, this is macro feedback from the world telling us how to be. So external feedback that we get as women in our workplaces, even if it's no feedback, even if it's being ignored, it forms our internal identity. And so you might be saying, well, what does this have to do with grit and grace? Well, after doing this research for the last several years, and after reading all those books and then evaluating the feedback that I was getting in my own life, I realized that, wait a minute, okay, let's back up. There are times that I, as a woman, and I see other women being really gritty and standing up for things and sharing ideas and speaking up at meetings and standing up for patients or confronting bias or confronting harassment or leading and being really courageous and brave. And I see women doing that. And I see those same women also at times being givers of grace and being the woman that is comforting someone a patient's family, a woman who is reaching out to make sure that a colleague who's struggling is okay. And it's almost like when we display these two attributes, because they're both needed in medicine, people then say, well, oh gosh, she's really moody. Okay, how many of you guys have ever been called that? Or, wow, she's really off today. So maybe you work with someone, or you personally are more of a quiet woman or more of a quiet leader. And then all of a sudden you have to take charge because there's a clinical situation that you need to take charge of, and you need to be vocal about it, and you need to express and claim your authority. And you come out of the dugout and you claim your authority, and everybody in the room goes, what's wrong with her today? When really you were just doing what was necessary for you to lead because you are a leader. So I recognize that, you know what, there are times in my life in medicine or as a leader that I'm a gritty leader. And I see women, I don't know a woman that isn't a gritty leader at times. She's got to be. But then I also can have extreme grace for people and myself, because it's also a necessity, especially right now when we have so many people that are hurting and struggling economically. They're struggling just to get through their day with the grief, the loss, the unknown. We need leaders that have both of these things. And I believe that if we let women be authentically who they are, which is to have both of these attributes and not one or the other, more women would choose to lead. If we increase the margin of how women have to be in the workplace, more of us would step into those roles because we wouldn't have to sacrifice our authenticity. So success really requires both of these things. It requires grit and it requires grace. And gritty attributes, so to speak, those assertive, confident, dominant attributes that we express sometimes because it's necessary for us to save lives or take over or lead in or teach or whatever we're doing. If you are a man and you have those traits, you are glorified. You are actually get higher annual evaluations, and you're seen by your peers as being competent. Now, if you have those traits as a woman, you're also seen as very competent, but you're not liked. And you get actually decreased likability scores in your evaluation. Versus if you are a woman who is more of a quiet leader, more of a team player, more collaborative, those are your gifts, and you're more supportive and nurturing and a helper, you have high likability on your evaluations by peers, but you have low competent evaluations, which is bad because we actually need leaders like that as well. And you probably are very competent, but you're seen differently. So this is called the social versus the leadership backlash. And when we bounce back and forth as women, we have to become this very narrow margin of a person, which doesn't allow a lot of space for authenticity. So if you look at this study, which looked at basically the social and the personalities between gender and leadership, it's totally described the backlash. And this is what happens when you go over a 30-year career. I love this little cartoon here because it's so true. There's times where we have to be aggressive and assertive. Someone will die, or a bad mistake will happen, or no one's listening to us, and we have to get our point across for safety reasons, and it still comes back to us. And so what happens is women don't want to lead. They don't want to lead because how they have to be to lead is so narrow. So now I want you to think about your own life and your own self and your own community or department or clinic or hospital. And I want you to think how you interact day to day in your own space. And think about a woman who's maybe at the end of her career, or maybe at a different generation of you, older than you. And do you know any women that are in top leadership positions, and how are they described? Oftentimes they're described as the queen bee or the ice queen phenomenon. And they are seen as competent, but not someone that you'd want to have coffee with. Okay. And I often hear women say, well, I really like that person, she's a really good leader, but she doesn't help other women. Or I really wish that she would help other women. I bet if you met with that woman, you would find that, number one, she's probably extremely isolated. As we saw from the charts, she probably doesn't spend a lot of time around other women in her day-to-day operations. And the fact that she's probably where she is over a 30-year career means that she's had to become that real narrow margin of what okay is, of what it means to lead as a woman. And the sacrifices that she's had to make are probably more than you and I could even describe. So it's changed how I view women in the workplace, and it's changed how I affirm other women in the workplace. This is a study that looked at, this is really interesting. They basically put recording devices in all high-level meetings, and they recorded women and men speaking, and actually the words they used and the tones. And the men who use similar words, very strong tone, were typically seen as 35% more likely to be competent and earned more money than the women. So there's even some, like even the way we talk, the tone, we're judged. Men are not judged like that. It's actually a positive trait. So this has significant effects, and you're smart enough, that you're intuitive enough that you pick up on these. You don't even realize you're picking up on it and changing the way that you interact in the workplace. So on one side we have grace, on the other side we have grit. Here's our social backlash. People that are women that are leaders, that are more team players, more collaborative, they get social backlash. So they're the people that everybody thinks they're nice and likable, but nobody thinks they're competent. The women who show more grit, they get the leadership backlash. But this is the thing, all of us have both of these traits, and we're somewhere on the spectrum given the day, our social surroundings, and the needs of our patients and our family. So this should make you feel good, because wherever you are, you're going to be judged. So be you. And when you are authentic, and when you display both of these traits, you pop open that margin, you open up that space, not just for you to lead, but for other people to lead, other women to lead. So what do we do? What can we do? And here's, if you think about it, this is kind of the diagram that I talked about over a 30-year career. Think about where you end up if you follow the social norms. So what do I do in my everyday life? I think about I look at other women and I think about, okay, are they being their authentic self, or are they trying to, do they have an idea but they're afraid to say it? Are they experiencing backlash right in front of me? And I call it out. And what I do is I will say, like, if I see a woman in a meeting and she's starting to get angry because she's passionate about whatever she's talking about and no one's listening, or she's an expert in something, God forbid, and nobody's listening, right? This happens all the time. Before, I would be like, oh gosh, she's making us look bad. Isn't that sad? That used to be my thought. How many of you have thought that? She's making us look really bad. Now I'll say, that is real. I want to hear more from Tara because she knows a lot about this. She's an expert in this. She's dealt with this issue before. Remember, we had this issue a couple years ago and she solved it. Tell me more, because you're really, you know a lot about this. You're really passionate about this. Tell us more. And what it does is everybody in the room stops and goes, oh, wait a minute. It's okay that she's getting angry or she's getting passionate about something. And also it goes, oh, Sasha's not, like, she's not competitive with this other person. She's not offended. And it makes everybody realize that socially it's okay to be gritty, that it's okay. Now, I also will do the same thing if I see a woman experiencing social backlash, like maybe, oh, well, yeah, we would ask her, she's really nice, but that's not for her. For example, I was in a meeting once and we had a position coming up that we were going to choose someone for that had a government contract. And somebody said, well, we would ask, and we had a woman that was going to be really good at this. And somebody said, well, we need somebody with balls. I hope I don't offend anybody that I said that. She just doesn't have balls. I was like, okay, stop. Why do we all agree that she knows the most about this topic? Yes. Do we all agree she's a hard worker? Yes. So basically, because of her personality, we're not even going to give her an opportunity to accept a position because we think she's too nice. Even though she was the first name that came to all of our minds when we described the position, simply because we don't think she can work with a military people. Like this was, so instantly I kind of said, let's open up the margin, right? So you don't have to be best friends with other women in the workplace to support them, because when you do this, you're actually opening up the margin for yourself as well when you support other women and call them out. So when we accept our own authenticity, and what do I mean by that? Okay, how many times have you come home from, maybe you had an issue at work during COVID. People are arguing about something and you have a solution. And you're like, you guys, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this today, and then we'll figure it out. We're going to follow this protocol. We're going to make up this protocol because that's what we're doing literally day to day. As you know, we're making up things. We're going to do this thing that we think is the safest for all of us and the patient. And then we'll talk about it. And you kind of take charge. And then you go home, you get through the scenario, you get through the case or the procedure or the treatment or whatever. And you get home and then you start second guessing your authenticity. What you're doing is you're second guessing your leadership skills. You're second guessing yourself. And you start going, oh gosh, was I too take charge? Maybe I should have let him take charge. Maybe I should have let the other people talk more. Oh, was I a little too abrupt to the nurse when I asked for this, or I asked for help? Maybe I should have been a little nicer. And is it resonating with you? Give me a little chat thumbs up, because that's what we do. We start second guessing our own authenticity. And we shouldn't do that. We really honestly should know that medicine demands grit. We will not last without grit. We also, as women, are grace givers, and that's good. We're communal. We're team builders. There's several studies to show that when women are in meetings, more ideas are shared because people feel comfortable to speak up more. That's us giving grace, showing grace. That's good. Those are good traits. Those are not weak traits. That's not weakness. So when we embrace grit and grace as compadres, as cohorts, and not opposites, we open up that margin, and then we go, okay, maybe that leadership position I can do, because I'm going to do it the way Sasha does it, not the way Bob would do it. I'm going to change the whole position to work for me and my authentic self. Because there's this old adage, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And all of us want the next generation of women to lead, right? We aren't going to make things better if we aren't if we don't have power, basically. And we need more than that 13, 7, 6%, 3% power that you saw. We need to be more than just the socks, just the calves on the WHO chart, right? From the World Health Organization. So we really need to embrace other women's traits and leadership styles so that we can open up the door to lead in those spaces, so that we can say, I want to be a leader. I want to share my ideas. I want to go for that position, but I want to do it as a woman. I want to do it as Sasha. I want to do it as Dina. I want to do it as all of you and your individual traits. And that's when we empower ourselves. And that's when we actually assume the power. And it's all about assuming power. And I say this at every meeting I talk to and every lecture I give, and because it scares everybody. Sasha's up there saying that women want to take over. Yes. That's what I'm saying, because we have a lot of things we need to work on, from maternity leave policies to equity to safe and good working environments. And all of those things improve when we have diversity and when we have more women and when we have people that think differently coming together. And right now we don't have that. We only have about 6%, 3% at the highest level, where the most important decisions are being made. So we change the margin through community. I'm not going to change things myself. I'm going to change it when we work together. You're all going to change it when you all work together, when you empower other people. People say to me all the time, like, yeah, but haven't you ever had a mean girl be mean to you? Yes, of course I have. Do I like every woman I work with? No. But I know that change happens when we support one another. So I do that. I do that over and over and over. You don't have to support or like someone and their personality to support them in the workplace, especially other women. And everybody's watching us. So let's amplify women outside the margin. Let's embrace our diversities and our personalities and our grit and our grace. And let's always invite more than one woman to be where we are. So I hope I gave you some encouragement today. And I hope that you see yourself as a leader. The minute you get out of bed in the morning and your feet hit the ground, you're leading yourself. You're choosing for you. And I want women to see themselves as strong leaders, even if they're just leading one person, because that's what we need in those areas where decisions are being made. I'm going to stop there so that we can do questions. And I hope I think it's about 1:35. So we'll have some questions and we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shillcutt.
Yes.
Yes, we are ready for questions. So everyone, if you can just type any questions you have into that Q&A box, and then Dr. Shillcutt, you should be able to see those on your screen and answer them at your leisure. I see
Okay.
Dr. Moran has
Here we go. What are the 3 most important tips you have for women in leadership positions? The first thing I think that is, when you are a woman, especially when you're the only woman, the biggest thing you need is you need an ally. And you need allies in the back, behind the scenes, that support you, that can give you advice. And you need allies in the room as well. So when I'm going to a meeting where I am going to come out of the dugout, so to speak, and I talk about this in the book, when I'm going to a meeting, I will have the meeting before the meeting. I will call and say, look, I'm going to speak up today and I really need your support. So when I speak up, I'm going to be looking at you to support me. That's the biggest thing. And then the other thing is, you need somebody to support you in the background. You need a friend that you can talk to, that you can share with, that you can trust. You really do. And the third thing is, I always tell people, it is better to say no to something than to say, yes, I'll do something and not show up. So you got to show up. When you're a woman, you're on the pedestal. You're judged for everything you do and say, unfortunately, and especially when you're in a leadership position. So it is better for you to hold back and say, you know what, I'm not going to accomplish that, than to say, yes, I'll accomplish that, or I'll do that, or I'll show up and fail at it. If you know you're not going to do something, or you're not going to be able to achieve something, just say it. Don't do empty promises, because that hurts your reputation as a woman. Another one, how did you bounce back from your burnout period to where you are today? What are the most important times to use your grit and grace? Oh, that's such a good question. So I was really burned out. I mean, I was so messy, and my life was a mess. On paper, I looked really good. I had so many things going on, and that was very difficult for me. I had grants and speaking engagements. I was raising 4 little children that I had in 7 years. I had 4 kids, and it was bananas. The biggest thing, the first thing I did, and I talk about in chapter 5, is I gave myself 30 minutes a day. The first 30 minutes a day, I would sit at the kitchen table and just cry, because I was so overwhelmed that I didn't want to be alone with myself. Because when you're alone with yourself, you get clarity. And when you get clarity, you see what's wrong, that you need to pull back and change some things. So I gave myself 30 minutes a day, and that became my lifesaver. And the more busy you are, the busier you are, the more you need that time. And then I healed. It took me about a year. I said no to a bunch of things. I pulled back from several commitments. I reorganized and prioritized my life and health. And then I realized I was really lonely. I had no women friends. So that's when I started to develop my online communities and Brave Enough. And I talk about all this in the book. The book is a self-guided study. So there's questions in the book throughout the entire book for you to kind of go through the same process, and for you to kind of dig deep. So it's really a workbook, and I encourage you to read it. How do you handle unfair treatment? Oh, that's a hard question. Obviously it's different for every person, and every scenario is a little different. Sometimes I vent to a friend and cry and talk about it. Sometimes I confront it head on. I do have an enormous amount of self-respect and confidence for myself that I didn't have prior. And so I don't allow myself, I know when I'm being mistreated, and I love myself enough to know that I won't stand for that. As I unfortunately was not that strong in the past. I've been untreated severely in the past. Now I know what I won't tolerate, and when to cut ties. But it's really important. One thing I will say is, I've never said anything that I've never acted in a way unprofessionally that I've regretted. I always have, I may cry or vent to a close friend, but when I go to my workplace, I keep it very professional. I encourage you, if you're being mistreated, not to gossip, not to tell other people in the workplace. Just find that one person that you trust, that you can talk to about it, and keep it professional work. It does not mean that you shouldn't confront things, or that you should remain in that relationship or under that structure, reporting structure, if you're being mistreated. How do you choose where to prioritize your time? This is the number one question I get all the time, and it's probably the most important. Also, it's in the book. I give a lecture on time management for women in positions. I've given this talk at different places. I give it every year at the Harvard leadership course. So it's really, really important to manage your time, and you have to be intentional. For me, I have a process, but every Sunday I spend 15 minutes managing my week. I can tell you, I have this little passion planner right here, goes everywhere with me. It's never far from my reach. And I plan my week because I have to have alone time every day. And I'm an extrovert. I love people. So this pandemic is killing me right now. I want to be around people. I'm super excited to do this, just to chat with y'all. So the fact that I'm telling you I have to have alone time just tells you how desperate I need that to keep track of my priorities. Because it's not like 30 minutes that I spend by myself every day thinking about my life and where I'm going, I have these epiphanies. It's just because everything quiets down, and I can see, okay, I was mistreated this way, and I keep getting mistreated, and I need to stop this relationship or this friendship or this work environment. I need to move on. Or, okay, I'm really struggling in this relationship with personally, or my health is struggling. You get clarity when you're alone. It's not that you heal everything when you're alone, but you get clarity. So I highly suggest you to get the book and read the book and do the exercises, because it's eye-opening. What do you do when you bring up gender bias issues to your male boss and he states he cannot help them because he can't relate to those issues as a man? Well, that's pretty bad, because 50% probably or more of his people that he reports to are women. So he should probably figure that out. I would maybe bring some resources in and say, how can we help educate the male leaders so they feel more comfortable in dealing with this? Because there is not one department, hospital, institution, division on the planet that doesn't have gender bias issue. Everybody has gender bias issues. So it's really, what are you doing about them? We all have them. The best institutions in the country have them. So it's not like it's a secret or it's like a stain. It's, what are you doing to address them? And I have found the approach of being part of the solution to be the best. So for example, I noticed a few years ago that women were not getting promoted as fast. And so I said, hey, can I look at the data? Because nobody likes to be surprised. And can I help? I want to be part of the solution. See, that approach is, let's look at the data, let's get the information, and let's be part of the solution. So that person needs some education and they need to be part of the solution. Okay, Dina says, that was excellent. Any thoughts on how women can lead and change in healthcare? It seems it's a critical time for us. It's so critical. I think that right now we need women leaders. Anything you can do that demonstrates you as a content expert, do it. Whether it's writing, whether it's in sending an email saying, hey, I can mobilize this, I can lead this wellness initiative, I can do this, do it. We often hold back because we aren't seen and we are ignored. Keep speaking up and step forward, step out of the shadows. It's safe to stand back in the shadows, but guess what? The men step forward all the time, and they half the time they don't even have half the expertise that you do. So step forward and share and get an ally. Recruit another person in your department to say, look, I'm going to be really brave and suggest this. It may fail, but do you have my back? That goes a long way. Do you have advice for appropriately promoting yourself, especially other women? How do you convince other? That's a great question. So, I would say that it's really important that whoever your direct report is knows what you're doing, and you amplify yourself to that person. I underestimated the power of this for years. I thought, I'm going to go and do my thing, and my boss is going to love me because I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to do all these things. I'm never going to bother him. But you know what? He never knew what I was doing. And the guys were in there all the time talking to him, and they were doing not nearly what I was doing nationally, but they were getting promoted. I had to have a face-to-face with him, and I had to learn that I have a routine face-to-face with him on issues as a leader. But I had to realize that I had to toot my own horn, and I had to say to him, I just got asked to give this talk. I just published this. I just did this, because I thought he was going to just notice everything I was doing. That's not how it works. I talk about that story in the book in chapter 2. How we look for our fairy godmother. We think we're going to go off and do all this work, and then we're going to get all this kudos for it. That's unfortunately not how it works at all. You have to self-amplify, and you have to amplify other women. So I will do this. Like, if I see another woman is getting something, I'll say, oh my goodness, did you see that she got this? Or, other women will ask me to amplify them. I do that often. How do you decide which opportunities to say yes and no to? How do you decide? Okay, this is a great question. Also, in Grit and Grace, I talk about priorities and how it's so important. And when you have that time with yourself every day, oftentimes we just say yes to things because we're under stress and we're exhausted. And it's easier to say yes than to stop and sit and think about it and realize the answer truly in your gut is no. So we overcommit ourselves because we're so tired. We don't even want to have the decision making. We have decision fatigue, and we don't want to have the discussion with ourselves. So we just like say, okay, yeah, I'll do that. Okay, yeah, I'll give that talk. Yeah, I'll take it. I'll write that. Yeah, I'll be involved, because we're tired. So that's why you will gain clarity. You know what you want to do and what you don't want to do. You really do. You just haven't given yourself time to think about it. And when you don't know, then either way is okay. Like, if both options or you're like, I don't know, then say yes or no, it's not going to matter. But most of the time we know, we're just too tired to actually say it. Rashmi says she's having trouble finding people to talk openly about challenges. Very good. Very common thing. It is hard to find someone. You don't have to have a lot of people, but you need one person that you can be vulnerable with. And it's so important that we have those relationships, especially with other women, because no one understands what we go through but other women. It's just true. I mean, I love my husband dearly. I love my male partners, but they don't get it. And they won't get it because they don't go through what we do. And you need that person that you can be vulnerable with. And I bet that she exists. So in chapter, I think 7 in the book, I have a chapter on friendship, and how we think as friendship when we're women at this stage of our life is like a bonus. We don't realize that it's life-giving. And, I mean, I was highly successful and I had all these wonderful things and a wonderful family. And if you looked at me, you would have thought everything was great, but inside I was falling apart. I took a year and I fixed myself, but you know what? At the end of that year, I was still really lonely. And it wasn't until I made friends that and let other women in and started being vulnerable that I really, really actually started to enjoy my job and enjoy my life. So don't give up. I actually have a whole chapter on friendship myths and how we create these stories about friends and other women in our lives when really they probably would love to be our friend. How do you handle, okay, let's see. I'm sorry. I'm trying to scroll here. What is the best technique to overcome the minimizing from gender and prevent your inner and from other gender and prevent your inner confidence? Okay, so I actually am just working on I have a class that I teach on confidence, and I'm actually working on getting it online. So stay tuned because there's more coming out, because this is a very common question I get about internal confidence, and I speak on the science of confidence. I've given several lectures on this. It's really interesting. Most of our confidence we learned as children, and we think it comes from success, but actually success comes from having confidence, and confidence comes from just taking action. So even if we say, like, tomorrow, they need somebody to write this new protocol for how we're going to put in central lines in the ICU. Oh, should I do it? I don't know. Can I do it? Even if we say, I'll do it, and we're rejected, there's some evidence to say that even us saying, I'll do it, is a confidence builder. So taking action builds confidence. How do you handle other women who can be difficult and are active barriers in your career progression? Well, unfortunately, all of us have that. Every one of us, myself included. And I think that women that are like that are a product of toxic environments where their thinking is all or none thinking. And that's a common thought distortion, where if I shine, she can't shine. But the truth is that I don't want to shine like any of you. I will never shine like some of you. I will never have the skills that some of you have, and I don't want them. I want to be who God created me to be and reach my potential, specifically to Sasha. So every time every time women do this to me, it hurts. But you don't have to be friends with everyone, and you won't be. And you just, at some point, you have to unsubscribe. I've had to confront one woman in my career who was really abrasive and obstruction to me. And I just confronted her and I said, I will not tolerate you treating me like that. And I've sent her some articles, actually. And you know what? She left me alone after that. She was kind of a bully and she left me alone. Do I like her now? No, any more than I did before. Is she friendly to me? Absolutely not. But she doesn't come after me like she did. And that I think she bullied me until I just said no more. So I think it's different for every woman, and you probably know the way to navigate that. What are your thoughts about the idea of uncertainty? There's so much uncertainty. Yes. Okay. Practical advice to handle uncertainty. Well, I don't know why, but this really helps me. There has been, I mean, I'm a cardiac anesthesiologist, and I would say, I just keep thinking this. There's probably 3 to 4 times a year where I get a call in the middle of the night to go to the hospital, and I have no idea how I'm going to take care of this patient and get this patient through surgery. It's a congenital case, or it's a trauma, or it's a patient that has this really bad problem and no access, or I have no idea. I'm going to have to do something basically I've never done before. And I've been practicing anesthesia for 15 years, and I still say at least 2 or 3 times a year this happens, where I get that feeling of like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I just think, well, what do? I try to think about what the best plan is. And 99% of the time, I'll call a colleague and say, I have this problem. I think I'm going to attack it this way. Is that what you would do? And just get feedback. So seek external feedback. And then I don't know why, but that's really bringing me a lot of peace right now, because even in medicine, with all of our amazing brains and expertise, there's still things that show up in our daily life pre-COVID-19 that we didn't know what to do. And we just did the best we can. And you know what? At the end of the night, I'm probably the best person that there is to take care of this problem. And so are you. So we're always going to have uncertainty. You know, we're going to get through this, and there's going to be another thing that comes up that we don't know how to face. It's okay. That's life. And think about how many times where you've been faced with a problem in medicine that you don't know, and you did your best, and you were probably the best person to take care of that. So be confident in your skills, and be confident that you're probably exactly where you need to be. And we're not supposed to have all the answers. We think oftentimes we are because we're doctors, but the truth is we don't. Even with modern medicine and all the wonderful things we have in this country, we don't have all the answers. And most of what we do, we're just trying to think about what we should do that's best, but a lot of it we don't have the evidence for. So that keeps coming to me, and I keep telling myself, like, this is really no different than a really hard case in the middle of the night that you don't know what you're going to do to get through. What do? You do the best you can with what you got. How do you come over isolation, especially by other women? How do you convince others? Yes. So this is when you are isolated, it is a very dangerous place to be. And I say that really seriously, because it's not about just having a girlfriend. It can be life-saving, because there's going to be times in your life where you are sad, or you are depressed, or you are anxious, or you are struggling with a family member that's ill, or whatever life throws at you. You need people to know the vulnerable, crappy sides of you. I mean, you really do. And you need them when life is okay, so that, like, when things like this happen, you have that support. And what we know from burned out physicians who go on to develop anxiety disorders, health disorders, hypertension, all these things, negative substance abuse, and even suicide, is we know that they were very isolated. And so I always tell people, women in medicine, when you feel isolated, your mind is going to tell you to withdraw more. When things are bad, your brain says, just withdraw. Nobody wants to know you right now. Nobody's going to want to like you. You're not any fun. You don't feel like being fun. Nobody wants to be around you. You got to actually do the opposite. That's when you really need friends. So you don't have to have 10,000 friends. You need one friend. And I want to encourage you to do that. I'm sorry if I sound like I'm preaching about this, but I'm really passionate about it. And I wrote a whole book chapter about it. Is this presentation going to be archived? This was exceptional. Oh, thank you, Robin. That's so kind. I hope that I gave you guys some inspiration. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for what you're doing. It's amazing what all of you are doing right now. It makes me get choked up to even think about how women are literally saving people everywhere. So thank you for having me on. Thank you, Alex, for setting all this up. This was awesome.
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Shillcutt. This was wonderful. And thank you to all of our participants.